Democrats have been obstructionists. Do you see any point for Democrats, or even an opportunity here for Democrats who have not seen an avenue, and certainly I don't think politically have wanted to work with Donald Trump on this, to perhaps do something? Should there be more of a plan or some sort of overture from your party?
Well, I think the fact is we've made overtures all along. What the president is really saying today is we want to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. Why won't the Democrats help us dismantle it? And he seems surprised that we're not willing to do that. Well, of course we're not willing to do that. We are willing to work with the president to improve the current health care system, but we're not willing to throw 20 to 30 million people off their health insurance. And what the president proposes is to do exactly that, to cut Medicare and to cut Medicaid. Basically, when he says we want to get rid of the requirement, as you just heard him, that people buy health insurance, he's essentially saying we're not really going to cover people effectively who have pre-existing conditions, because if you don't have to buy health insurance when you're healthy and you can simply buy it when you're sick, no one's going to buy health insurance until they get sick. That system just doesn't work. It's why I think the Republicans have had so much difficulty among themselves coming up with any kind of a replacement that doesn't really cost people their access to health care. So we're willing to work with the president. We've always been willing to work with him to improve the system, not to jettison tens of millions of people from their health care.
It is difficult. I will certainly give you that, as you hear him making all of those big promises about what this plan will do, and we know that actually the plan does not do those things. But at the same time, what has been the genuine overture from Democrats to do something that is within your realm of acceptability? Not talking about jettisoning the individual mandate, but doing the things that you want to see that would improve Obamacare.
Well, you know, there are lots of ways that we can explore introducing more competition into the exchanges, bringing more young people into the plans to help keep costs down.
But what's the overture to the White House, the overture to President Trump to do something?
Well, the overture is, look, if you want to fix some of the problems in the Affordable Care Act, we acknowledge they're there. We acknowledge in some states that the plans are not competing. There aren't enough plans in the exchanges. We're willing to help change that. What we're not willing to do, though, is to be complicit in booting millions of people off their health care. So this is the area we want to work on. All of us acknowledge that a bill that was written 7 years ago affecting 1/6 of the economy isn't a static process. You can't say, okay, we passed health care reform, now we're done. But because we've had this endless fight to repeal, we've never had the opportunity to make the fixes that we should. So our offer to him before, now, and in the future is, when you're ready to sit down with us and improve the operation of our healthcare system, we are ready, we are willing, we are able, we are eager. But we won't be part of cutting poor people off their health care so you can give wealthy people a tax cut. That's not where we're coming from. And if you can't deliver your own members for that, don't ask us to do it.
Congressman, I do want to get back to Russia. That's what we were originally talking about here. And we're learning more, as you know, about this 8th person who is in this meeting with Donald Trump Jr., as well as Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. They met with a Russian lawyer. Ike Kavaladze, he's a senior vice president at a company that was run by the Russian businessman who initiated scheduling this meeting. What is your reaction to this news?
Well, look, I think it's very significant who was at the meeting and how it was set up. And you see now all these contradictory statements by the oligarch, Aris Agalarov. You see contradictory statements of the person he sent to the meeting. You see the contradictions now with the Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya about who set up the meeting and why. Plainly, I think the oligarch wanted his person there, Kavaladze wanted him present, because they were going to deliver some damaging information about Hillary Clinton, and the oligarch wanted credit for setting up the meeting, for delivering the goods. And we've also had contradictions now by the Russian lobbyist, who says that, in fact, a folder was passed to Donald Jr. And Kushner and Manafort from Veselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer. But here we have one person, Kavaladze, who has a history of opening bank accounts that the GAO suspected was used for money laundering of Russian money. You have a second person, a Russian-American lobbyist, who has a history of litigation of employing Russian hackers to steal emails and discredit a rival company. And then you have a lawyer, Veselnitskaya, with a history of working to repeal U.S. sanctions against Russia for human rights abuses. That's who's in this meeting where the promise is to deliver dirt. So to me, it's very significant who was sitting around that table.
You and Natalia Veselnitskaya, who you just mentioned, she is now saying that she's willing to appear before Congress. She told this to RT, which of course is Russian state media. Here is what she said, and we should mention this has a translation on screen.
Давайте так, я прояснять ситуацию готова к сегодняшней совершенно массовой истерии, исключительно только в правовом поле. Либо через адвокатов, либо в качестве показаний в Сенате.
Вы готовы проехать в Сенат?
Да, я готова, если мне будет обеспечена безопасность. Потому что сегодня я должна думать прежде всего о своей безопасности, о безопасности своей семьи, своих 4 детей.
Okay, so she says, certainly with conditions, she wants to guarantee her safety, that she would be willing to testify before the Senate. This is, of course, the attorney who Donald Trump Jr. met with in the hopes of getting information about Hillary Clinton. Does the House Intelligence Committee, the committee on which you are the top Democrat, have a desire, any plans to hear from her?
Yes, we expect to invite her to testify, as well as everyone who is sitting and participating in that meeting. We expect any that are willing to cooperate, particularly any of the Russians who would have to come to this country. We would welcome their cooperation. But I think a really key part of that interview also is where she claims not to know who set up this meeting or why. That's simply not credible. We know from the emails why this meeting was set up. And to suggest, as she does, that she doesn't know these other parties, we're to imagine that somehow she flies from Moscow to this meeting without any idea of how it was set up or by whom and for what purpose. That just isn't very credible. We have to expect, even though we would like her to come testify, that there's probably an effort on the Russian end as we speak to get their story straight. But you also have contradictions by the oligarch who was part of arranging this meeting, who said initially he had nothing to do with it, now is forced to acknowledge the presence of his person in the meeting. So a lot of contradictions that our committee will want to work through with these witnesses.
You've called for the Russian-American lobbyist at the meeting. The man that you just referenced is someone with sort of questionable tactics in the course of his job as a lobbyist. You want him to testify before the Intelligence Committee. Where do things stand on that and also on other sort of outstanding areas in this investigation?
Well, he'll be invited to testify as well, and we'll want to seek any documents that he has. He has said publicly that Veselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer, gave a plastic folder of information to Donald Jr. or the other participants there. That is being contradicted by Veselnitskaya, so we'll want to find out who's telling the truth, what they received. But I think of even greater significance is what happened before this meeting. What are they referring to when the emails say, as part of the Russian government's effort to help Mr. Trump? That sounds like there's been pre-existing work. We'll also want to know what happened after this meeting in terms of follow-up, and whether the suggestion by Donald Jr. that late summer would be the most helpful time to release the dirt is a coincidental timing with the publication of the stolen DNC emails, which happened in late summer, or whether there's more to it than mere coincidence.
So you think it would be coordination with? That's a difference in saying later in summer, meaning closer to the election. You actually think it goes as far as to be tied to the release of emails. Is that just something to you that makes sense, or is that something that you have evidence of in your capacity on the Intel Committee?
Well, it makes sense to me, and I can't talk about what evidence we may or may not have, but what makes sense to me, and I think you've heard this from the former CIA agents that you've had on the program, or CIA officers, is Russian tradecraft would employ just this kind of means of testing whether a campaign is receptive to a relationship in which they get something of value, and that is dirt on their opponent in exchange for something of value they want, which is repeal the Magnitsky Act. So the message sent loud and clear by the Trump campaign in this meeting is we would love that kind of relationship. And the deliverable may have been in the form of these emails that are dumped, that gives them a cutout and plausible deniability, but nonetheless delivers